So the first thing we're going to talk about today is 1 and 2 variable data tables. So when you're creating a variable data table, the first thing you need to do, of course, is make sure that you're on the correct sheet in your workbook. So what we're on right now is the management sheet tab in our workbook. And we're going to be going up here to cell D5. And we're in column D, row 5. And just make sure you're in the correct cell because that'll throw your whole thing off if you're not in the right place. And we're going to be referencing another cell as we're working through here. And the first thing, you have to set up your data table before you can create it. So we've got to set up the information in it. So in this problem, I'm in project step number 1 on this module 8 SAM project 1A. And it's telling us something that we've been doing for a long time. It says enter a formula without using a function. And so we know how to do this. When you enter a formula without using a function, all you're doing is putting in the equal sign. So I'm going to reference cell B4 by just saying equals B4. Okay. And when I do that, it highlights in blue over here, cell B4. So I'm just going to hit enter. So it's bringing over that information from cell B4. And so the next one tells me to, again, enter a formula without using a function that references cell B19. And I'm in cell E5. So again, make sure you're in the right place, column E, row 5. And so I'm going to reference cell B19. And I'm going to do this. Whoops. Didn't put my equal sign in. Make sure you do that. I'm going to do this all the way across really quickly. Equals B20. And then this one is equals B21. Okay, so now to set up my one variable data table, I'm first going to select my range. Now it tells me D5 to G21, or I'm sorry, G10. Woo, gotta get my numbers right today. So D5 to G10. So that is the area where I want to create my one variable data table, okay? So in order to create this, I'm gonna go up here to the data tab, go over to the forecast group and select the what if analysis and go down to data table. Now I'm only using a one variable data table. And so I want to tab down to the column input cell. And you may be asking, why do I want to use the column input cell? Well, in the problem that we're using, it tells me that I'm using cell B4 as my column input cell. If it had told me to use B4 as my row input cell, I would have put in row input cell, but it told me to use it as column input cell. So that's why I'm going down to column. Okay, it's as simple as that. Follow the directions in whatever it is you're working on. So I'm going down to the column. And what I want to do is I want to go over here and select B4. Okay. And when I do that, it creates an absolute value. Yes, I can type in B4, but when I type it in, I don't get that absolute value. So that means I have to either highlight it and do the F4, and that takes extra time to do that. Or I can, of course, type in B4, and then I can go back and put the $sign in front of each one of them. And that takes time as well. So the easiest way to do it is just to go and, when I'm in the column one, go over here and just with my mouse, I'm going to click in cell B4. So what that does is it puts B4 where I want it. It automatically makes it an absolute value. And what that does is it locks in cell B4. So whatever data is in B4, it doesn't matter whatever data I put in that cell, it's always going to pull that information. Okay. So now look what happens when I tap OK. Everything automatically feeds into my table. So that's how you create a one variable data table. Pretty easy, huh? Okay. So I'm going to go down here, and the next one is to create a two variable data table. And what I'm going to do on this one is, of course, make sure you select the correct range. Follow your directions. If you have to input information into it like we did first, go ahead and do that. But on this particular problem, we don't have to do that. All we have to do is select the information. Select our range. So we're just going to select D14 to K19. Make sure you select the entire range, D14 to K19. If you only select D14 to K14, you're not going to be able to create a two variable data table. So make sure you have the entire range selected. Again, we're going to go up to the data tab, forecast group, what if analysis, and select our data table. Okay. On this one, since we have two variables that we're inputting, we're going to be putting in both the row and the column information. So again, make sure you follow the directions on this and do exactly what it tells you to do, because it says to do for the row, cell B5 is the row. So I'm going to select B5 as cell, and again, look, it makes it that pretty absolute value for you when you select it automatically. And for the column, I'm going to select B4 as the column input. So I'm going to go up here and select that. Okay. And now I'm going to click OK. It automatically feeds that information in there to me. Now there's one other thing that it asks us to do on here. Oh, let me show you one thing real quick before we move on. I've created my nice pretty table, and we made these absolute values, right? It automatically makes you an absolute value. Well, we've locked in these cells, B4 and B5 as our absolute values. Well, if I go in and need to change something, say I incorrectly entered a number up here, maybe that was supposed to be 6,500. And I realized it later, look, it changes everything. Everything that's tied to that absolute value, it's going to change it in my entire workbook or worksheet, wherever it has a tie to that formula. So you don't have to go back and make a change individually everywhere. That's one of the benefits of using absolute values. Okay. That way you don't have to make changes all over the place, and remember everywhere that you've used that number somewhere else. So it's just a great idea to use things like that in Excel. Okay. Because that way it's going to change it everywhere you've used that. All right. Okay. So now let's finish up this problem. We're now going to show you how to apply a custom format to this cell. So we see that the number we're using here is 130,000. Okay. Is the number up here, but we're referencing the cell B21. Okay. But we want to apply a custom format. So let's see what it does when we apply a custom format to this. So we're just going to right click, go to Format Cells. So when you open up Format Cells, you get all of these options that come up. So we're going to go to Custom right here, right underneath where you see the word type up here. You're going to delete this information that's under type, and you're actually going to type in whatever you want it to say. And we want it to say the text hours / price. Okay. And you notice I put it in quotations. Remember back in module 7, when we were working in those columns and when we were writing out those formulas, we had to use the quotes to pull out the information that was in those columns. Anytime you want to retrieve or show something in a column or in your spreadsheet, always use the quotation marks. So if you're, what we're doing right here, we're giving a command to Excel kind of in the background. We're telling it, hey, I'm making a custom, I'm wanting to format the cell and I want it to say this. So we're commanding Excel to do this, okay? We're giving a command like to the computer. And so you have to be very specific, okay? And we're telling it, we want you to say this to show it in print. So anytime you want basically the spreadsheet to show something, and you're giving it kind of a behind the scenes command, you have to do it in quotes. I hope maybe I explained that a little bit better for you. It's kind of like when you're reading a textbook and it shows somebody speaking in first person, kind of like when you're reading a book, everything's just written in paragraph form. But when the author wants to show you that somebody's speaking in first person, they always put it in quotations. That's kind of what we're doing here. If the computer wants to show you that something's coming through from the back end, you have to put it in quotes to show that it's going to come through and actually be visible. Okay. Maybe that makes sense to you a little bit. But anyway, that's why we're putting it in quotes, because we're giving a command from the back end of this. It wouldn't normally be visible to us, but when we want it to be visible on our spreadsheet, you have to put it in quotation marks, okay? So when I put in the okay, when I say okay down here, we're gonna be able to see it. Now, when we click in this cell, you can still see where our reference is. We're still referencing B21, but you can see what that custom format is on the outside, okay? So that is how you create a 1 and a 2 variable data table.